sometimes we have to step back as operators, really focus in on what we're trying to accomplish, and then not allow ourselves to be distracted, thinking that we can run complex operations like call centers when there's opportunities to go out to the market and partner with true experts.
Welcome back to the Dental Economist Show with me, Mike Huffaker. Today, we are excited to welcome Demias Pegues, a seasoned executive known for his exceptional leadership in operations management across the healthcare and retail sectors. As the CEO at My Orthodontist, a network of family-owned orthodontic practices in North Carolina, Demias has significantly advanced strategic growth and operational efficiency. His deep understanding of both corporate and clinical settings has allowed him to foster a culture of accountability and success within the organizations that he leads. Welcome to the show, Demias. How are you today?
I'm doing great, Mike. Yeah, thank you. That was a great introduction.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you've got a really, really interesting background, and we'll dive into some of it here in a minute. I think just at the outset, and you and I were speaking briefly before we started recording, but all of your practices, your business is in North Carolina. We're recording this just a few short weeks after Helene had come through. I just want to check in. How are your people? How are the businesses? What's the general kind of sentiment there in your state right now?
Yeah, obviously the storm was very tough, impacted a lot of individuals on the western part of the state. By the way, they're still looking for volunteers to do very basic things on the west side of the state. So there's various ways where you can donate financially, but also just with your time. But fortunately for us, from a business standpoint, none of our practices were impacted, none of our people were impacted. But of course, we all know some loved ones, friends that we have on the western part of the state that were impacted, and we're definitely thinking about them.
To start off here, I was looking at your LinkedIn profile, so I stalk everybody before they come on the show, and it stood out to me that you have a really kind of unique career trajectory and path. You started with some time at Target, Home Depot, Cox, and that took you to Luxottica before you ended up at NADG and inside the dental and orthodontic space. How do you think that those past experiences in retail, where you were, leading the charge with these organizations that had many, many storefronts, set you up to be kind of uniquely capable to succeed inside the dental and orthodontic space?
Yeah, there's two things that I sort of always wanted to do in my career. And I actually started my career as an engineer, but I realized pretty soon that I wasn't an engineer. I was a business guy. But, I've always wanted to be in healthcare and work in healthcare, and I've always wanted to be an operator. So when you look at my resume through that lens, it sort of explains the journey I've been on, where I have a lot of healthcare experience, as well as multi-unit experience, as you were saying, with Target and Home Depot. And to your point, it's helped me develop sort of how to lead large organizations and really how to drive results across different states. In different states, you have different cultures from practice to practice and from state to state. So one of the things you learn whenever you're working in organizations like that is, you really learn that the key to success is to really get to understand the people that are running that business. Because ultimately, we, the leaders, our job is to support them and help them be successful. Because on a day-to-day, and I learned this in jobs like Target and Home Depot, where I was literally a store manager servicing hundreds of patients every day. At the end of the day, those customers, they are there to see me really and my team, and not really the folks at the corporate center, right? So that is probably what I learned the most, is that key to success in this kind of business is to make sure that the teams and the practices are set up for success.
When you come from organizations that have such a fantastic reputation for service, as a Home Depot does, in my past life, I used to work at Nordstrom, and I think that gave me a really strong kind of foundational understanding of how to take care of people when they come in to work with you. When you moved into dental and into healthcare, did you feel like the lessons learned there were already being executed inside this space? Or did you think that there was an opportunity to impart some of those learnings and maybe the way that the patient kind of experience was viewed had opportunities to be improved based off the experience that you had had coming from that retail background?
Yeah, I definitely think I learned a lot from, particularly with Target. Target is an elite retail organization, not only with respect to operations, but also with how they approach the customer experience and how to take care of our team members. I used to say all the time, everything in Target is a process, and everything in Target is about, the people and the customers. So I took that mentality to my jobs in retail or beyond retail into healthcare. And for example, one of the first jobs that I had in multi-unit healthcare, I took over a region that was not doing well. And I had a meeting with the team after I first became their leader. I was the vice president of operations, and I brought all my team, which was my regional managers, together. And I wrote a ton of metrics on the board, including one metric in particular, which was the engagement level of the team. And basically, we measured engagement by saying, do you plan on being here 12 months from now? And we had the lowest engagement score for our region did in the entire company. So I asked my team, sort of which one of these metrics are the most important. And, a lot said it was profitability, it was sales. And what I pointed out to them at that time is that actually this low engagement score is the most important metric on this board, because at the end of the day, I had 80 locations across 4 states. And how are we going to convince them to give the customers a great experience? This was at LensCrafters, when they're not having a great experience day to day with us. If they were having a great experience, clearly they wouldn't half of them be saying they were going to leave in 12 months. So we tackled that number. We were able to move that metric from, the worst in the company to one of the best in the company. And our overall sales performance and profitability followed right along with it. And I learned that was very much a Target sort of mentality that I was bringing into that situation.
It makes a lot of sense. It kind of follows with that mantra that you can't take care of your clients or your patients if you don't take care of your people first. I really like that approach. I want to touch back on your engineering past real quick, because I find this really interesting. So you got your degree in mechanical engineering. Our CEO, Eric Gieske, he was also a mechanical engineer, and now he's CEO of Planet DDS. I'd be curious, you said, I learned or I figured out that I wasn't an engineer and that I was a business guy and an operator. What was it that was kind of that like internal journey or discovery that brought you to that conclusion?
Great question. And it actually was something that happened to me the second semester of my junior year when I was back in college studying to be an engineer. I took my first business class. And that class was just a seminar. And I had CEOs and COOs would come in, CFOs, and they would talk to us. And I was just, locked in every time they would talk. They would give us materials to read. I would read all the materials. I was oftentimes staying after class so that I could talk to them. And I realized at that time that I was a business guy. I don't know if I would go back and do it differently, Mike, quite honestly, because I learned so much from being an engineer about process and quality and how to set up large operations. So that whole experience has served me very well. But I knew at that moment, even before I graduated with my engineering degree, it's just at that point I was too far down the road to change, which is why I went back later on to get an MBA and to switch over to business.
Almost like it all worked out exactly how it was meant to.
I feel like it did. Yeah.
Now, when you talk about that you enjoy being an operator, what is it about being an operator that is, kind of fuels your passion?
It's sort of like being a coach, and it's helping people win. That is the ultimate rush. I had a breakfast meeting with a young lady that we just moved from one position to another. And, it's a tougher role for her. So I was just taking the time to sit down and have breakfast with her and talk. I just wanted to understand what was on her mind. I have a tremendous amount of confidence in her. I know she's going to do very well. And I've put her in this challenging position, and I can't wait for her to excel in this role. I mean, she's already started to make changes. She's very hard on herself. So I just wanted to let her know, hey, we see what you are already doing. We're supporting you 100%, and we know you're going to knock this thing out of the park, and she will. Just having those opportunities, being able to build people up, set them up for success, challenge them, and then sit back and be there to support them as they win, because as your people win, your organization wins, obviously. It's just the best thing in the world. I really enjoy that about being an operator and leading large teams of individuals.
Very well said. When we were communicating about doing this podcast, we were kind of going back and forth a little bit about maybe what some of the topics of discussion could be. And, in the space right now in dental and orthodontic, it is very much a lot of conversations about same store growth. In the past, maybe in the very recent past, a lot of it was driven on M&A and acquisitions. And it was like you can grow through addition versus optimizing your performance in individual practices year over year, same store. That's been something that you guys have been incredibly successful at. You mentioned that you have had 7 straight quarters of double-digit organic growth, which is fantastic. And I think anybody today will look at that and say, yes, I want that too. What do you attribute that to? What are some of the things that you look at? What are you guys doing right, differently? Kind of share a little bit about that success that you've achieved.
Yeah, and keep in mind, I started with the organization about 18 months ago. So it was March of 2023. I was the COO when I started, and then I was promoted in January of this year to the CEO. So when I came in, there were a lot of things that the company was already doing very well. In particular, one was we use EOS, the Entrepreneurial Operating System. At the end of the day, what does that mean? That means the organization is aligned from top to bottom. Number 2, we had great analytics. And we had analytics not only on the operational side, we had them on the clinical side. And then we also had analytics around our patient funnel, right? Which I'll talk more about here in a second. And then we had a strong team. And all 3 of those things, to be quite honest, when I walked in the door, I wasn't sure if those things were going to be in place, because sometimes for smaller businesses, they're not, right? There's not sort of this process of keeping alignment, setting goals, tracking those goals, determining whether or not we're being successful. You don't necessarily have the strong analytics and so on. So all of those things were in place. So when I first started meeting with the leadership team and we started, we were looking at how do we grow our revenue with our, existing set of business, and then how do we grow profitability? There are 2 things that we did. One was we said, okay, we have an opportunity to optimize our patient funnel. The other thing was we had an opportunity to, sort of optimize our P&L, if you will. And that's 2 different things. So the way we talked about our patient funnel back then, and this is something that I learned in previous experience, and it's something I'm starting to hear more and more when I go to conferences and when I'm talking to some of my peers. You can visualize your patient funnel this way. For every 100 patients that call you, how often do you answer the phone? And I think if you would ask, for my business folks out there, doctor owners, fellow CEOs, go research that number and determine what it is. Generally, if you were just to walk up to someone and ask them, they would say, well, we answer the phone 95% of the time, et cetera. The truth of the matter is most organizations answer the phone 60 to 70% of the time. So when you think about organic growth and an immediate opportunity to grow your business, answer the phone a lot more than what you do, right? So the first thing you have to do is sort of start to look at your data. When patients are reaching out to you, for us in orthodontics, it starts with that phone call. Are we answering the phone at a high rate? And then out of that number of calls, how many of them become exams on our schedule? And then how many patients actually show up for the exam? And then that turns into a start appointment. And then how many of those patients actually come in and start? We started tracking those numbers, and what we found, Mike, is that we had a leakage throughout that funnel, and there were opportunities to tighten it up. And that in itself, just optimizing that patient funnel, making it easier for patients to get to us. And then when they did reach out to us, making sure that we were answering the phone, answering if they were doing it online, we were responding online. That in itself started to grow our top line right out the gate.
I've heard a lot about the challenges with answering the phones, and it makes sense. And what you just said, I agree with. I initially, when the first person I've ever discussed this with brought it up, they were like, what percentage of phone calls do you think? I was like, I don't know, at least like 95, right? Like, how would it not be that high. I didn't put a lot of thought into all the challenges that come with working the front desk in a practice and all the distractions that happen and the fact that you might be on calls with other patients and all these other things. But when you make it a focus and you decide that it's something that needs to be fixed, you talk about the leakage in the overall kind of new patient pipeline that's created. What do you do? Like, what tactically are the things that you have to do to fix that and to shore up that leakage and ensure that it doesn't continue to happen?
When it comes to answering the phone in general, and when I came here, we had a call center. We have 14 locations. I didn't say that. With my orthodontist here in North Carolina, we have 14 locations across the state, like you were saying earlier. So we had a centralized call center, and whenever a patient, a consumer called us, they press one, it would go to our call center. And pressing one meant I'm a new patient and I'm trying to set up an appointment. Even with a call center, we answered the phone only 60% of the time. Well, why is that? Well, my background, and you were asking me earlier about some of the things that I've done along the way, particularly with Cost Communications, which was a telecommunications company. When you're telecommunications, and which is a cable company basically, when you're trying to set up new cable service, how do you do it? You pick up the phone and call. I know that's probably, changing more and more over time now. But back when I was in the industry, we had huge call centers. Someone would move from one apartment to the next or one home to the next, and then they would call and say, I need cable service in my new home. Well, I learned a lot about call centers in that role. And here's the thing about a call center. It's a science, just like most other things in business. And there's an expert way to do it. And then there's a way to do it that's not optimized. So sometimes I think we, sort of overestimate our capabilities when it comes to what do we do. So at my orthodontist, what is our role? What do we do? Well, we straighten smiles. We are definitely not experts in call center management. So what did we do? We outsourced our call center. There's a group called Unique. We call them Unique, but it's called UIC in Southern Indiana. I had used them previously at another DSO, had a very good relationship with them. And we reached out to them and they started taking our calls, and our answer rate pretty much overnight went from, we were actually below 60% of the time, even though we had a call center. Our answer rate went from just call it 60% to 90+% overnight. And we immediately started to see that in the number of starts that were hitting our schedule, where we were starting to see, like, quite frankly, 100 more appointments across our 14 locations every month. So 75 to 100 additional starts every month. So sometimes, we have to step back as operators, really focus in on what we're trying to accomplish, and then not allow ourselves to be distracted thinking that we can run complex operations like call centers when there's opportunities to go out to the market and partner with true experts, like we did in this situation.
Now, I see oftentimes where executives maybe can't see the forest through the trees when it comes to making a change like that, where moving to an outsourced call center or organization may on paper, and I don't know if this is even correct, may be more expensive than what you were doing before. Or there's a viewpoint that, and now I'm lose control. There's just this kind of stigma maybe with the outsourced kind of title. One, I mean, look, if you are increasing the percentage of calls answered so dramatically and increasing the amount of starts, who cares if it's more expensive? Your return on investment would be phenomenal anyways. But is it actually like a cost neutral exercise? Is it something that costs more when you go to outsource versus what you were doing internally? And then how do you get the buy-in from your organization when you make a change like that based off of the concerns that people might have about the control of quality or something else?
So to answer your question about cost and savings and so on, and we did not make this change to save money. At the end of the day, the call center could answer the calls at a 40% of the cost that we were paying. Now, why is that? Well, it's because when we were having efficiencies in our call center and not, necessarily being able to answer the phone, it's a lot to it, right? So if you're going to have a call center, basically, there's high turnover in call centers. You have to be able to hire. You have to make sure you hire the right person. Then you have to make sure they're trained. You need analytics so that you can, understand who's doing well on the phone, who's not doing well. We didn't have any of those things, right? So we had a highly inefficient call center internally. And the minute that we outsourced it, the opposite became true. They had a very, very efficient system with the right tools, with the right quality assurance in place. They monitored their calls. They used technology in a way that we were not using technology. So the truth of the matter is, for a 1,000, I'm just going to make up numbers, but for 1,000 calls that came in, we may have needed 8 people per hour to answer those calls. They needed 4 people to answer the same amount of calls. So we didn't go into it thinking this is an opportunity to save money. We just wanted to answer those phone calls that were coming in. But at the end of the day, because the experts at this, and this group that I talked about, that's all they do is, well, I would say not all, that 90% of what they do is just work with dental. So they're experts literally at just answering dental phone calls. They can work with multiple PMS systems and so on. And when calls come in most cases, as you probably know, like their call centers across the country, they are remote now, right? So they have, they could go longer hours because they had people in California all the way over to New York, answering phones. So not only did they answer at a higher rate, but they answered longer hours and they answered at a higher level, but they could just do it at literally 60% less.
Now, was there any objection internally when you went to make that change? Was it pretty easy for people to understand the benefit that you were going to get from it?
I think the thing is that we needed to work through, and this is just a reflection of our founding doctor, Dr. Larry Murray, and who he is. We wanted to make sure, because at that point we had team members working in a call center that were impacted by this decision. If you were to look at the practice side of this, they were getting more appointments on their schedule. In the way that we do compensation with our doctors as well as our teams, when they get more start appointments, everybody's making more money in the practice, right? So it's a win for them. But for those impacted team members, how we handled that, we made sure that we handled it in a way that was consistent with our mission, vision, values, and with the beliefs of our founding doctor and our visionary, so that we were taking care, one, giving them opportunities to do other roles inside the company, but then two, ultimately, if we had to part ways, that we did it in a very respectful manner.
When you look at the outcome for this, then you mentioned P&L earlier, and you essentially had multiple levers of benefit. Now you have more starts, you have more appointments booked, you have lower cost, you have expanded coverage throughout the course of the day and hours to ensure that you're not missing calls. Is there a point in time when, should your organization grow? Right now you're at 14 practices. Do you think that different stages of companies require different things? And do you think that there would be, and how would you think about it, a time where you would want to bring it in-house again? What would be the criteria that would have to take place? Or does it just always make sense to use a professional organization like this as you scale?
I think it always makes sense, to your point, to evaluate, is there an opportunity to centralize something? Is there an opportunity to outsource something? And is there an opportunity to automate something? And I'll relate that to your point about the P&L. And one of the things I wanted to sort of leave along with, optimizing your patient funnel, but leave your listeners, is the other thing you should do is optimize your P&L. So then how do you optimize your P&L? There are benchmarks that are pretty consistent for the industry, that all doctor owners or business owners out there in healthcare should understand. So, for example, depending on what kind of business you have, so if you're a general dentistry business, there's a certain amount that across the industry, when you look at it, is spent on supplies and labs. And just say it's 5% on supplies, 5% on labs. If you are sitting at 15%, combined with those two, one is 8%, one is 7%, there you are leaving, for whatever reason, and there are various reasons why this may happen, you are leaving sort of bottom line profit on the table. And you need to investigate that and look deeper into that situation so that you understand, why is it on average that the industry is paying combined 10%, but you're paying 15%? You need to look at labor the same way. You need to even look at sort of your level of bad debt. In the industry, bad debt is 2% on average, and your bad debt is 4%, and you're writing off 4, 5, 6%. Why is that? It's an indication that you need to look more deeply into your business. So when you're looking at your P&L, you may have, money fall into the bottom line, of course, and that's always a win. But the question is your P&L optimized? That is a different question. So are you running your business in a similar way that compares to the rest of the industry? And if the answer to that is no, and you're lagging behind, you really need to dig in and understand why that's the case.
And what is the discipline that you instill in the organization to make sure that you are looking at those right things consistently? Is there a type of cadence? Is it always front and center? How do you know whether or not you are, moving in the correct direction with these benchmark analytics?
One thing is, I'll say, go back to EOS again. And then the other thing I would say is aligned incentives, again, compensation and how we pay our team members. So with EOS, if you're not familiar with EOS, just 30 seconds on it. At the beginning, what EOS does in a practical way is at the beginning of the year, we meet for 2 days as a leadership team offsite, and we plan what are we trying to achieve over the next 12 months. And then every 90 days, and then we set goals for the year. And then we say, okay, what do we need to do in the next 90 days to achieve those, to be a quarter of the way to achieving our year-long goal, if you will. And then every week we meet to say, are we on track to achieve our 90-day goals? And if we're on track to achieve the 90-day goals, that means we're on track to achieve our year-long goals. So we meet every week. We look at our, what we call rocks, which are our priorities for the 90 days. We do that for 90 days. And then at the end of 90 days, we meet again for a full day and we say, did we achieve the things that we wanted to achieve the previous 90 days? And then, oh yeah, what do we need to do the next 90 days to again be on track to achieve what we want to do for the year? Now, that's very detailed, but that's the point. The system is designed to keep everybody on the same page to, one, set clear goals for the year, and then track those goals throughout the year in a very consistent way, where it's getting the leadership team together. And in those meetings, we're looking at our priorities as well as looking at data, key data, to say, yes, we're on track to achieve the things that we want to achieve, or we're not on track.
Thank you for explaining that. I did want to go back and ask you about it because I was not familiar with the term. And it reminded me, EOS was Entrepreneurial Operating System?
Operating system, absolutely.
Awesome. And it sounds like there are probably some similarities to the OKR format where it's like objectives and key results that you're kind of keeping front and center for the entire organization. Did you put people through any type of class, or is this something that you train people on? Like, how do you think about continuing to perpetuate like a culture of continual growth? Because just from my own experience within my own organization, sometimes there's a lot of great ideas like these types of frameworks to implement, and then it becomes challenging being the one that's looking to kind of drive that implementation or get people to understand what it truly means. So I'm just wondering how you manage that and how my orthodontist manages it. I think you said it might have already been pre-existing from when you joined, but how you keep it kind of where even new people that come on board are able to be understanding of what those expectations are.
So with EOS in particular, there are groups out there that will come in, set up the entire system, and facilitate it for you for as long as you need them. So again, we started with EOS, I think, after COVID, and it was in place again a couple of years before I arrived. And then once I came on, we still had a facilitator, and I learned how to facilitate the meetings from the facilitator. And then eventually I took over, which is how the system is designed, that somebody will take over and be able to facilitate those meetings. So now at the beginning of the year and every 90 days, and actually every week for our weekly meetings, I facilitate those meetings. And if I ever feel like we're getting off track, I can just reach back out to my facilitator. Obviously it's not free, it costs money, but the money that is spent over a year's time to have someone come in and facilitate, and to your point, make sure that you're on track, is money well spent.
As a CEO, what do you think is the most important part of your job? What's the one thing you got to get right?
To make sure that, well, I'll say 1A and 1B. One, make sure that we have the right people in key positions throughout the organization. So that would be my leadership team, my direct reports. And then that would be every doctor and office manager. Now, who do the patients come to see? The doctor. So without question, in any healthcare organization, the most important role is the doctor. What is the second most important role? I would argue is the office manager. And here's how I think about this. If you were to line up all of our patients and say, and then line up everybody in the company, a patient that goes to one of our locations would say, and you say, well, who are the most important people? They're going to point out the doctor. And then the second person they may point out is like the office manager, or maybe it's their dental assistant, or maybe it's the person at the front desk. But they will, you will go through the entire company before they would say, oh, it's the CEO or the COO, because they don't even know we exist a lot of times, because we're behind the scenes, which is where we should be. So, and making sure that that is understood, that we have the right people in the right places throughout the organization, and then making sure that we have the right cultural understanding, which is sort of what I was explaining to you in the, just now, is that we see our role we're not a headquarters, we're not corporate, we're a support center. And that is truly our goal, is to support our leaders in the practice, which is primarily that office manager, that doctor, setting them up for success so that the patients have the best experience possible. So we're servicing that doctor, we're servicing that office manager so that she can serve as a doctor. And as long as we keep our focus there, which is, kind of my job, making sure that we're focused there, then I think we'll continue to have success.
This next question is maybe a little bit self-serving from the perspective of a software organization that sells SaaS software products. And maybe it's would be more attuned to a CFO, but I'm sure you have some opinions on it. One of the perspectives I have, and this could be way off, and you can say like, you're an idiot for even thinking that, and I will accept that, is that when we are presenting a product that is a subscription-based solution, which is typically OpEx versus CapEx, that strong organizations that have a healthy balance sheet are not typically concerned with using subscription-based services because their business is so healthy already that it is not going to have the negative EBITDA effect that they anticipate it may. When we are pitching to somebody who might not have as healthy of a business, they get really focused on the CapEx portion. How do you think about subscriptions and services and software when you're out there in the market? Is it something that you put thought into as it relates to EBITDA effect? Or is it something where if the outcome is so great, then it doesn't much matter as whether or not this pricing structure of the solution that you're buying is framed in one way or another?
After you have optimized your patient funnel, after you've optimized your P&L, you will start to realize that you have a lot better cash flow in your business. And the very next thing you need to answer as a leader is, what is my IT stack look like? So what is my PMS? And then from there, what add-on technologies, as you think about automation, am I adding to that? And I don't want to say the money won't matter, but you'll be financially in a great place because you've done those other things. And now this is your next level of how you're going to grow your top line and your bottom line. So here's how we think about it at My Orthodontist, just thinking about technology more generally, is we want to get to a place where humans do not facilitate conversations between computers. And there are lots of examples in dentistry. So if you were to look at medical has been moving down this road where the computers just talk to the computers, if you will. And now that technology is starting to spill over into dental. So you think about insurance verification, that's one of those opportunities. You think about if you are online appointments. So for right now, for example, with our PMS, a patient can go online, and if they want a new appointment, they can set a new appointment, and that information will go from their computer right into our PMS. But if they wanted to change an appointment, they can't do it. Well, we're getting ready to roll out a technology that will allow that to happen, because right now, if a patient needs to change an appointment, they have to call us. So on average, our 14 locations get 19 calls a day, people saying, I need to make a change to my appointment. And, we have to make sure that there's someone, since it's not a new appointments go to the call center, but all the rest of, new calls go to the call center, but all the rest of the calls come to the practice itself. So we want to empower our patients to be able to make that change themselves. So at the end of the day, again, we're just thinking about technology all the time. And are there ways to implement technology, regardless of how we're doing it, that will save, reduce some pain points for our patient, but also reduce some pain points for our practices as well.
Now, I'm curious, why do you have the appointment changes go back to the individual offices, option 2 or whatever it is on the call tree, versus having the call center take care of it if they do have the capability of accessing the practice management software and making the appointments at the outset?
It's just one of those things where a lot of times it's easier because, it's sort of, one, we want to prioritize new patient calls. They go to the call center, you get, that white glove service. The rest of the calls are, did I leave my sunglasses there? Did I leave my credit card, my license? So it's just easier, or, I'm on my way, but I'm kind of lost, so it's just easier for the practices to handle some of those. But the majority of those 19 calls that we get in the practices, it is sort of, I need to make a change with my appointment. And we just want to be able to empower really the patient to not have to call us for that, right? They would prefer not to call. They would prefer just to do that online, right? So again, it requires you to step back. What the thing we cannot do is as business leaders, is think about these things in a vacuum. You have to start with your practice management software and say, is that practice management software an open platform where you can now start to add these other technologies that will create different, additional efficiencies throughout your business?
When you're thinking about the future, let's just say over the next 12 months, and this can be related to technology, it can be related to anything in their space or with your business. What are the things that you're most excited about? Any initiatives that you're working on, any new technologies, any focus areas? It can really be anything. I'd just be curious as to kind of your viewpoint, your crystal ball, what's coming up and what's going to be really great.
Yeah, we're really continuing to optimize our patient funnel and in our P&L. And we're in the process of implementing Legwork, which is actually a Planet DDS product. And we are using Legwork. They're up to do two things. One is to optimize our marketing so that we can track when we do things online or we do promotions online. Legwork will allow us to, put an ad online and then track literally patients that responded to that ad. They clicked on it, whatever they did, and then whether or not they ended up setting an appointment and then eventually coming in and becoming a start. So we can spend money on Google or however we're doing it to get an ad out there and then know through this platform, because it is integrated directly into our PMS, we'll be able to know through this platform exactly the return on that investment that we made online. The other thing that we'll do through Legwork is what I was just talking about, is that now, because again, it's integrated in with our PMS, it will allow our patients to have more capability on their end to be able to adjust appointments and so on, so that, again, patients don't have to call us. So it's also a patient communication platform. And it does a lot of other things, like sort of automatically, if a patient clicks on an ad online and then we don't hear from them right away, it'll send a reminder automatically. And it may send it via text, it can send it via email and so on, right? So it's just going down that road of optimizing, continuing to optimize our patient funnel in these ways and optimize our marketing so that it's easier for patients to be able to find us. That's probably one of our biggest initiatives that's ongoing right now.
I think what is so important about what you just said, and this is a challenge that I fight against in my own organization at times, is you want there to be something shiny and new that you're pursuing, when really, like, the bedrock business initiatives that have to be done and have to be done well don't necessarily change. So you're like, we are still optimizing our patient funnel. We are still optimizing P&L. Like, it's not something that there's a finish line per se. It is a always act that you have to be continually focusing on to ensure that you're driving, the maximum amount of value to the business. I think it's really easy to get into a place where you say, well, we did that. So now what we're going to do is we're going to go over here and do this other thing. So the fact that you guys keep that front center, I think is super important.
Someone said about, I don't know if this is true. I heard someone saying this about Nick Saban. And Nick Saban, of course, is the coach from Alabama, recently retired, but won, 6 national championships or whatever it was at Alabama. But he was talking about his front line on offense, and for that matter on defense. But depending on what kind of play they were running, he would coach the offensive line to your feet. If it's a running play, maybe pointing straight ahead. If it's a passing play, pointed 35 degrees to the left or whatever it is, it'll give you just an additional amount of leverage over the person on the other side. So, and I bring that up to say, you sort of never exhaust your ability to do the basics, especially when you have new technology coming into the industry like we're having in dental, especially when you have opportunities to centralize, to outsource, and so on, to automate, to use AI. All of these tools out there, you have to look at them and say, is there, just another additional leverage point that we can get in this business? And if it is, then it's worthy of you pursuing it. So I don't know if we'll ever get to a point, because the world around us is changing and allowing us to be more efficient in the trenches, if you will. And so that's why we'll continue to go back to that. At the same time, we're also looking at, some of the more futuristic technologies that are out there, but you never exhaust looking at, doubling down on the basics.
Where do you go to learn? As you continue to develop yourself, what are the different avenues that you pursue in order to do that?
Yesterday, our founding doctor and I sat down with Mick Janess. I don't know if you ever had Mick Janess on here, but he's the CEO of Oak Point. It's a larger DSO. They're also based here in North Carolina as well. So one, reach out to peers without question, leverage them, lean on them. I talk to industry experts quite a bit, whether they're on the broker side or on the DSO side or private equity side or whatever part of sort of this industry that you're on. I talk to them quite a bit, and I go to conferences a lot and I walk the halls, and I go from table to table, and I look at the technologies, and I bring my team. I don't go by myself. I bring my operations lead. I bring my clinical lead. I bring my marketing person. And we work the halls, and we, look up and down for new technologies, new opportunities, because in dental, and guess what? Every time we go to one of these meetings, we learn something new.
Perfect. And no, I have not had Mick on the podcast yet. He's on my list. If he happens to be listening, would love to have him on at some point. Demias, this was really great. I really appreciate you taking the time. Anything else? Any parting words before we jump off? And maybe share, if somebody wanted to reach out or connect with you, what the best way for them to do that would be.
Absolutely. Hit me up on LinkedIn. I respond to all, sort of messages that come to me via LinkedIn. We can connect from there. Then we can exchange phone numbers. And I just, again, love talking shop and staying connected with my peers out there in the industry. And then I would just, reiterate, patient funnel, is it optimized? That P&L, is it optimized? And if you're really struggling, I know you had D. Fisher on here, I think 3 or 4 weeks ago. If you just do not understand where to start, you can't wrap your head around it, reach out to people like D. Fisher, other experts in the industry that are consultants, and they'll be able to help you, get on the right track if needed.
Thank you so much. It was a real pleasure.
All right. Thanks, Mike.
The Dental Economist Show is brought to you by Planet DDS, home of Dental OS. To find out more about how cloud-based dental software by Planet DDS helps unleash dentists and their staff to focus on patient care, visit www.planetdds.com. Stay tuned for upcoming episodes by following wherever you listen to podcasts. And thank you for listening.